We often define loneliness as a kind of misfortune. If no one loves you, you must be lonely. If no one waits for you, you must be lonely. If no one truly understands you, you must be lonely. And so, you fear that feeling as if it were some kind of spiritual punishment. You fill your days with busyness, your nights with other people's voices, your mind with relationships, just to avoid being alone, because you believe, if I'm lonely, I must have done something wrong. But what's the truth? Loneliness is not a punishment. Loneliness is a threshold. It is the beginning of a journey no one ever told you about. A journey without stage lights, without applause, without a role to cling to. Just you, raw, honest, vulnerable, standing before the question, who am I if no one stays? Carl Jung once wrote, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. And loneliness is the first state of that inward gaze. If you feel left behind, if you hear more silence than laughter, if no one has said your name in a while, do not panic, because maybe you're not being excluded from life. You're being summoned back to a deeper, more authentic, more original version of yourself. 1. Loneliness is not a failure, it is the condition for transformation. We are often taught that loneliness is something to avoid, as if it were a sign of a flawed life. If you have no one by your side, if you are not surrounded by relationships, if your phone is silent and your schedule is empty, then you are failing. That is what society has deeply ingrained in your subconscious. But the deeper truth is exactly the opposite. Loneliness is not a failure. Loneliness is an essential stage for inner transformation. Carl Jung, one of the masters of depth psychology, saw this very early on. He did not view isolation as punishment or pathology. On the contrary, he called isolation a sacred threshold, where a person begins to confront their true self. With no more roles to play, no more applause, no more external recognition to lean on, the sages throughout history all shared the same journey. Buddha sat alone under the Bodhi tree. Jesus entered the desert for 40 days. Jung wrote the Red Book during years of deep inner turmoil. It wasn't by chance. It wasn't because they had no one around. It was because they had to walk through solitude to touch the essence. Loneliness is the space where all pretenses fall away. You no longer need to be okay. No one is in front of you to perform for. You begin to turn inward and realize there are parts of yourself you have never truly lived with. And just like the cocoon of a butterfly, which seems like an ending, it is actually the silent space where rebirth happens. No butterfly bears radiant wings without first going through the darkness of the cocoon alone. Humans are the same. No one can touch their truth without daring to enter the solitary stage. So if you are in a period where no one understands you, no one stays, no one accompanies you, don't rush to conclude that you are failing. It's very likely you are being summoned into a higher process, a transformation which can only take place in silence, in stillness, in solitude, and once you pass through it, you will no longer be the same. You will be the real version, never again distorted by external expectations. 2. Escape the illusion that loneliness is forever. What makes loneliness painful is not just the emptiness. It's the quiet fear whispering inside you. Why be like this forever? When you are cut off from familiar connections, when no one texts you, no one waits for you, no one understands what you're going through, you begin to believe something is wrong with you. And worse, you believe that this state will last forever. This is the greatest illusion that loneliness creates, the illusion that it is fate. Not just a phase. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And it is precisely because we fear confronting ourselves in that silence that we seek every way to escape loneliness. Rushing into a relationship, cleaning to work to numb the feelings, staring at screens from morning to night just to avoid hearing our real inner voice. But running away never makes loneliness disappear. It only prolongs the loop and robs you of the chance for real healing. If you can stay, not run, not avoid, you will begin to see something strange. Loneliness doesn't last forever. It has a cycle, like winter in nature, seemingly barren, but in truth, a time when roots grow deep. And then spring comes, but it only arrives after you've stayed long enough not to panic about the winter anymore. Pain doesn't last. Low emotions don't last. Only the illusion of permanence makes you collapse. Once you see that, you are no longer overwhelmed. You begin to surf the wave. instead of being swept away by it, and in the moment you accept that loneliness is just a phase, you step into a deeper part of the journey of finding yourself after letting go of the panic about losing someone. Free. Loneliness is the harshest psychological mirror. Loneliness is not just the absence of people around. True loneliness is when there is nowhere left to hide, when there is no more hectic schedule, no more conversations to fill the emptiness, no more social media to soothe emotions. You sit alone in a quiet room with yourself, and at that moment, you begin to face the most dangerous mirror, the mirror of your untouched inner self. That mirror does not reflect the polished image you showed to the world. It reflects the thoughts you've never voiced, the feelings you suppressed, the pain you laughed off. You begin to hear your own voice again, the sound that has been drowned out by the world's noise for years. What do you see in that mirror? Anger that was never acknowledged. Jealousy is buried beneath the mask of "I'm fine." The hurt of being abandoned, even while you said, "It's okay." All of it appears, unedited, unfiltered. It is you, the part of you you've never dared to admit. This is why most people run from loneliness. Not because it's boring, but because it is too honest. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the repressed part of the unconscious, containing traits we do not want to see in ourselves. But he also said, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. We cannot become a deeper version of ourselves if we continue avoiding that mirror. Because only when you are brave enough to stand still and look directly, without defense, without denial, do you truly begin to transform. The harsh psychological mirror does not exist to condemn you. It exists to return you to yourself. And once you are brave enough to look, truly look, something miraculous happens. You are no longer afraid of yourself. And when you are no longer afraid of yourself, you are no longer heard by the world in the same way. 4. Loneliness peels away the borrowed self. We all have a self, but the question is, where did it come from? Most people live with an identity they didn't choose. It was assigned by others, programmed by society, and shaped by culture. Since childhood, you were told to be good, to be smart, to fit the standard. Growing up, you continued to wear different masks: the ideal lover, the exemplary employee, the upbeat friend, and you performed those roles so well that you forgot who you were without them. Loneliness, in its purest form, is where those masks begin to fall away. There's no one to impress, no gaze for you to perform to, no pressure to keep acting, and from within that initial emptiness, you begin to notice something strange. Maybe what you once thought was me isn't you at all. Maybe the goals you chased for years were just reactions to others' expectations. Maybe the personality you wear is just a suit tailored by circumstance, not by choice. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of separating from the borrowed self to rediscover the true inner self. Not to become someone special, but to return to the original part of you that has been buried. That process is not gentle. It's like shedding a skin that's clung to you for years. You will feel empty, lost, and unsteady, but you will also feel free. For the first time, you begin to ask yourself, what do I truly believe in? How do I truly want to live? If no one were watching, how would I choose to exist? And those questions, no one can answer for you. They can only be lived with in silence, in solitude, in radical honesty. Because after you have peeled away all the borrowed roles, what remains, fragile or fierce, is truly you. 5. Pain is not punishment, it is purification. We grow up with an implicit belief: if something hurts us, it must be wrong. If a period brings us suffering, it must be a sign of failure. And if a path brings loneliness, doubt, and fractures, then surely it must not be for us. But the deeper truth is, every profound purification process passes through pain. You cannot be reborn without first falling apart. You cannot live authentically without peeling away the false layers that have clung to you for years. And you cannot find your true self without first being stripped of the borrowed selves you mistook as your own. Carl Jung once said, pain is the doorway to transformation. Not all pain is punishment. Some pain is ritual. Some pain is a spiritual furnace, where the false is burned so the true may emerge. And some pain, if you dare to stay with it, will open doors that comfort could never touch. In solitude, when you no longer have anywhere to hide, Pain begins to rise, regret that was never cried out, anger buried under the mask of "I'm fine," fear of not being loved, not being enough, not being worthy to exist. But the terrifying part isn't those emotions. The terrifying part is that you don't allow yourself to feel them. You try to rationalize, you seek to fill the void with work, relationships, and humor. You mute your heart, then wonder why you can't hear it. Pain on the inner journey is not a sign you're going the wrong way. It is a signal you're touching what's real. And the truth always hurts at first, because it no longer lets you hide. It forces you to feel, to see, to stay. But if you can endure that pain, without running, without resisting, without judging, you'll discover the pain begins to dissolve, and you begin to see clearly. Clearly who you are, clearly what no longer fits, clearly how you once betrayed yourself and how you can begin again. And when pain is no longer your enemy, it becomes your teacher. 6. Jung's warning: do not turn pain into identity. If pain is a teacher, then it should stay only until the lesson is learned. The problem is, many people never finish the lesson. They choose to live in the classroom forever. The more they hurt, the more they build an identity around the wound. The more they suffer, the more they define themselves by the very thing that broke them. From once being betrayed, they become someone who can never trust. From once being abandoned, they become someone who can never love again. From a single pain, they build a whole identity. And this is what Carl Jung sternly warned against. Do not identify with the wound. Do not make pain your dwelling place. Pain comes to be felt, not to be nurtured. It comes for you to learn something, not for you to live forever as a victim cloaked in tragedy. The more you hold on to pain, the more you retell the old story with emotions still undigested. The more you reinforce a reality that only needed to be witnessed, then released. Some people no longer need others to hurt them. They do it to themselves every day through memory. They cling to pain as proof that they were genuine, that the world is unfair, that they were never chosen. But they don't realize their continued retelling of the old story is stealing their chance to write a new one. The truth is, you have the right to hurt, but you also have the right not to live perpetually in a wounded state. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means looking back without flinching. It means being able to tell the story without being dragged back into it. It means the story once hurt you, but it no longer controls you. When you stop making pain your identity, you reclaim the right to be the author of what comes next. 7. Transformation happens in silence. True transformation does not come from dramatic moments. It does not arrive like thunder in the sky or some miraculous awakening. It does not come from someone appearing to rescue you from the darkness. True transformation always begins in one place: silence. Not everyone can bear it, because in silence, you have no one to blame. You have nothing left to distract you. You are left only with your full presence and everything that has been buried. Carl Jung called this state where the deepest dialogue begins, not with others, but with your own mind. This is where the true restructuring of the inner self takes place. No one sees it, no one applauds, there is no spotlight, there is only questions no one can answer for you, fears that cannot be rationalized, and vague emotions with no names. You begin to realize the things you once thought were dreams might only be borrowed expectations. The relationships you once clung to might have been mere reflections of emotional dependency. And the goals you once chased may not have been your soul's calling, but just an effort to be accepted. These realizations don't come like lightning. They come gently but deeply. They settle in, rise again, return, and eventually form a silent but undeniable clarity. And then you realize something. You are transforming, not from a not enough version to a better version, but from someone who lived to please into someone who truly knows how they want to live. You start to grow quieter, not because you are weaker, but because you no longer need to speak as much. You no longer react to everything because you know not everything deserves your attention. Transformation does not need to be proven. It does not need applause. It does not need others to agree, because it happens from within, and only you can truly see it, and that is power. 8. Rebirth in the psychological wasteland. There is a stage in the inner journey that no one prepares you for. The stage where everything on the outside seems to have fallen away, but nothing inside is yet clear. Jung called this the psychological wasteland, a place where you are no longer your old self, but have not yet become who you are meant to be. It is the vast emptiness after you remove the mask. It is the feeling that all points of reference have disappeared, yet your feet still hesitate to move forward. It is the moment when you are no longer seeking outward, but not yet trusting inward. In this wasteland, you may feel lost within your own life, no longer belonging to what is familiar, but not yet belonging to anything new. A suffocating loneliness, even though you know you are on the right path. Rebirth is never loud. It is like a seed buried deep in the soil, unseen, unacknowledged, unapplauded. It endures darkness, pressure, and waiting. And then, in a moment no one can predict, it breaks through the surface. You are the same. In the wasteland, what you need most is not answers, but the steady presence of yourself. Not rushing to build a new identity, not panicking to find someone to attach you back to the world. Just staying long enough to see what still survives within. It is here that you learn. Not every emptiness needs to be filled. Not every silence is dangerous. And not every unclear phase means you are lost. The psychological wasteland is not where you are abandoned. It is where you are being prepared to step into a new depth. No one walks through it and comes out the same, but those who dare to walk through begin to live with a self the world can no longer steer off course. 9. Making peace with the shadow. Everyone has a shadow, not an evil thing that needs to be destroyed, but parts of yourself you once rejected, taught by society to hide away. It could be the anger you never dared to admit, the envy is buried beneath phrases like, "I don't care," the desire to be loved, seen, needed, but covered by a mask of self-reliance. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden psyche within us. And he didn't teach us to fight it. On the contrary, he believed, we do not become whole by eliminating darkness, but by making peace with it. When you enter true solitude, where there's no one to impress, no role to lean on, the shadow begins to emerge. You feel confused. Why'd I feel angry? Why'd I feel small, jealous, and ashamed? You panic because you think you're regressing. But no, you're beginning to see your full psychological map. The shadow is not the enemy. It is simply the part you abandoned. And like a child locked in a dark room, it knocks not to harm you, but to be acknowledged, to be embraced, to be understood. Making peace with the shadow doesn't mean abandoning ethics or reason. It simply means you dare to look instead of denying. You dare to sit with the most unlovable parts of yourself and say, "I see you, I won't exile you anymore." And strangely, when you do this, the shadow no longer controls you. It no longer rules your unconscious. It becomes an integrated part of a mature self, because a truly mature person is not someone made only of light, but someone who holds their darkness without letting it lead. 10. The return. Living in the world with a refined self. No one stays in solitude forever. And once you've gone deep within, through pain, through the mirror, through the wasteland, through the shadow, a time will come when you return to the world, not as the old self, but as someone reshaped from the roots. That return is not loud. There is no applause, no banner saying, "Welcome back, awakened one." You step out quietly, but profoundly change. Your gaze is deeper, your words are fewer, but your presence touches others, without needing explanation. Carl Jung once said, "True transformation is not complete until it is lived through action." You cannot remain in your inner world forever. Awakening must be brought into the world, through your choices, your posture, the way you show up each day. And you will see, some old relationships no longer fit. Some values that once guided you now feel hollow. Some dreams you once dreamed no longer call to you. That's when the dissonance between you and your old world becomes clear. You may feel lonely once again, but this time, you're not afraid, because you've learned how to be with yourself. You begin to rebuild, slowly, deliberately, consciously. You choose relationships out of resonance, not fear of loneliness. You work from values, not just to meet expectations. You listen to others, without losing your inner voice. The return is not the end of the journey. It is integration, where the refined self begins shaping a new life, not needing to be perfect, just honest and rooted. And from there, you no longer need to prove anything. You simply live as someone who has met themselves again. 11. Loneliness becomes a lantern, illuminating others. When you have walked through the wasteland, made peace with the shadow, and reach the unshakable stillness within, you will realize something very strange. You no longer need to teach anyone, yet you are already leading the way. Not through words, not through grand philosophies, but through presence. Loneliness, when fully lived, will refine you into a quiet lantern. Not dazzling like fireworks, not loud like slogans, but warm, real, and impossible to ignore. In a hurried world, those who have passed through the deepest silence carry a special kind of magnetism. They do not speak much, but when they do, others listen. They do not need to assert themselves, but when they are present, everything calms down. They do not seek praise, but anyone near them feels safe, because they no longer live to attract attention. They lie from a deeper place, where proving is no longer necessary. Carl Jung once wrote, "He who has looked into himself is no longer afraid of the darkness in others." And that is exactly what makes you a refuge, even if you never intended it. You begin to sense the pain others are hiding, even if they never say it. You hear the deeper layer in their words, things still unnamed. You do not rush to advise. You do not try to fix. You are simply there, like a calm mirror, so they, too, dare to face themselves. And that is the quiet gift you offer. Not salvation, but grounded presence, helping others no longer fear entering their own depths. You do not become a healer. You are simply someone who once healed yourself, so you understand. So you see, so you feel, and like a small lantern placed in the night, you do not light up the entire world, but you help someone find their way back to themselves. Not through tactics, but through truth. Not through pressure, but through inner freedom. The very thing they've been searching for outside. That is why Jung believed loneliness is not only a personal journey, but also a preparation for a quiet mission, to lead without stepping on the podium. And you, the one who dared to walk through the fire, now become the gentle flame others seek, when they too are about to begin their own journey. 12. Loneliness is no longer darkness, but the home you can always return to. When you have never stepped into true loneliness, it feels like a vague fear, something you constantly try to avoid through busyness, connection, and every form of distraction. But once you've stayed there long enough, not avoiding, not pretending to be strong, not trying to make it pass quickly, you will realize something profound. Loneliness is no longer darkness. It becomes a home, not a home with wide doors, with laughter, with someone waiting, but an inner space where you can be yourself. No reason needed, no roles to play. There, you do not have to be okay. You do not need to appear strong. You do not have to strain to please anyone. You just need to be, honestly, fully, without editing, and you discover no one out there can give you the sense of safety like your own ability to be alone without falling apart. Loneliness, now, is no longer a sign of deficiency, but a secret source, where you recover after the noise, where you filter what is real from what is distortion, where you close your eyes and hear yourself again, when the world out there begins to spin too fast. Carl Jung once said, "Silence is where the soul finds itself again." And after you have passed through pain, faced the shadow, and touched your true self, you no longer see loneliness as a state to overcome. You begin to return to it as a ritual. When emotions go off balance, you return to loneliness to find equilibrium. When the world starts demanding too much, you return to loneliness to remind yourself what truly matters. When you feel you are about to lose yourself for someone else's gaze, you return to loneliness because that's where you once found yourself. Loneliness, then, is no longer frightening. It becomes a quiet companion, not interfering, not demanding, not judging, just there, like a space you can always return to, when the world is too loud, when you need to touch what is real again, and in the moment you see that loneliness is no longer the enemy. Not a state to heal, but a sacred part of the human journey. You have stepped into a new kind of freedom, a freedom that does not come from belonging to someone, but from belonging to yourself. After everything, you realize you were never truly afraid of loneliness. You were only afraid that when everyone left, there would be nothing inside you to hold on to. But you stayed. You sat in the room with no one beside you. You walked through the pain, the mirror, the wasteland, the shadow. You cried, you raged, you went silent. You learned to embrace yourself. And then, very quietly, you changed form, no longer panicking when misunderstood, no longer needing relationships to feel worthy, no longer living to become better, but to become more real. Carl Jung once said, "The person who looks within does not just survive, they become whole." And now, you know, loneliness is no longer something you need to escape. It is the sacred temple where you were once reborn. It is the stillness you will return to whenever the world gets too loud. It is the quiet anchor where you remember who you are and what must never be lost. You step out from it, no longer seeking recognition, no longer fearing abandonment, because now you belong to yourself. And from that place, you no longer need to stand out. You only need to be present, with a depth no one can imitate.